The shrill cry of a child shattered the silence of the night. It wasn't the soft whimper of a newborn, nor was it the wail of a toddler seeking its mother's comfort. No, this was something else, something deeper, more unsettling. A voice too strong, too matured for an infant. Abini's eyes snapped open. The hut was still dark, the only light coming from the dying embers of the fire in the center. She turned towards the woven basket where her baby, Adissa, had been sleeping just hours ago. Her breath caught in her throat. The basket was empty. Her pulse roared in her ears as she scrambled upright, her hands shaking as they searched the soft bedding where her baby should have been. Her heart pounded violently. Had someone stolen him in the night? Had a spirit come for him? Abini's lips parted, about to call for her husband, when she heard it again. The cry, deeper this time, more like a child than an infant. She turned sharply toward the far end of the hut. There, crouched against the wall, was a boy. A boy of about 10 years old, his wide eyes staring at her in terror. His face, Abini's breath hitched. His face bore the same features as her husband, the same shape of his nose, the same deep-set eyes. But it was his mouth that made her heart clench in fear. She had seen that mouth before, just the night before, in fact, when she had kissed her newborn son to sleep. This child, this boy, was Adisa. Abini could not move, could not speak. She only stared at the impossible sight before her, at the child that should not exist. And then, slowly, the boy raised his hand. A small, trembling hand, as though he too did not understand what had happened. And he spoke. "Mama." The voice sent a violent shudder through her spine. It was Adisa's voice, but older, matured, holding confusion and fear in equal measure. The sound of it shattered whatever paralysis had gripped her, and she lurched backwards, knocking over a wooden stool. Her scream tore through the quiet night, waking the entire compound. Within moments, the sound of hurried footsteps and alarmed voices filled the air. Her husband, Kola, was the first to burst into the hut, his spear clutched tightly in his hand, ready to fight whatever danger had caused his wife's distress. "Abini, what is it?" His eyes darted around the dimly lit room before settling on the child standing at the corner. His brow furrowed. "Who is this boy?" Abini could not answer. She could only clutch at her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The boy, Adisa, looked from her to Kola, his large eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Baba," he whispered, his voice trembling. Kola staggered back as if struck. He looked at the boy again. Really looked at him this time, and realization dawned on his face like a gathering storm. His grip on the spear faltered. "No, it cannot be." His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "This is not possible." By now the villagers had gathered outside, their torches casting flickering shadows across the walls of the hut. Murmurs spread through the crowd as people tried to make sense of the commotion. Then the village chief, an old man with eyes sharp as an eagle's, stepped forward. "What is going on here?" he demanded. Kola and Abini did not respond, but the chief's eyes soon landed on the boy, and his face darkened. The old man took a slow step forward, peering at the child as if trying to see something beyond the flesh. He took a deep breath, then exhaled sharply. "This is not natural." His voice was steady, but his expression was grim. A hush fell over the crowd. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. There were whispers of spirits, curses, and dark omens. Abini clutched her chest, shaking her head in denial. "This is my son," she pleaded. "This is my Adisa. I do not know how, but it is him." The chief's gaze softened, but his words remained firm. "If this is truly your son, then we must understand what has happened here. The gods do not act without reason." He turned to the village elder, a woman known for her wisdom and knowledge of old magic. The elder stepped forward, her aged face unreadable as she observed the boy. Then, in a voice filled with quiet authority, she spoke. "This child is touched by something beyond our understanding. The spirits have a hand in this. She turned her gaze to Abini. Tell us everything. What happened before the night ended? Did you see anything unusual? Hear anything strange? Abini swallowed hard, her mind racing. She thought back to the night before. She had put Adisa to sleep as usual. She had stayed beside him, singing softly until his tiny eyelids fluttered shut. Nothing had seemed out of the ordinary, except her breath hitched as she remembered something. A sound, a whisper. It had been faint, barely audible, but now that she thought about it, it had not belonged to the wind. A voice. A voice that had murmured something just before she drifted to sleep. She had dismissed it then, thinking it was just the remnants of a dream. But now, Abini shuddered. The elder saw the change in her expression and narrowed her eyes. You remember something, she said. Speak, child. Abini hesitated, then slowly, hesitantly, she whispered, I heard something, a whisper in the dark, just before I fell asleep. The villagers stirred uneasily. The elder's expression grew grave. And what did it say? Abini swallowed, her throat dry as she forced the words out. It said, he will not remain small. A sharp gust of wind blew through the gathering, making the torches flicker wildly. A collective shiver passed through the crowd. The elder took a step back, her eyes never leaving Abini's face. Then, after a long, tense silence, she turned to the chief. We must act swiftly. The chief nodded, his jaw set. He turned to the crowd and spoke with authority. No one is to leave the village tonight. No one is to speak of this beyond these walls. We will find answers before dawn. Abini's heart pounded. She looked down at Adisa, her son, now a stranger in a body too old for him. His small hands clutched the fabric of her wrapper, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. But Abini had none to give. She did not know what had happened. She did not know why her son had aged 10 years in a single night. And worse, she did not know what would happen next. The night stretched on, thick with tension. No one returned to their huts. The villagers gathered around the central fire, their faces bathed in the glow of the flickering flames. Adisa sat close to his mother, his small hands clenched tightly in his lap. He barely moved, barely spoke. His eyes darted around, absorbing everything, as if trying to make sense of the world that had changed so suddenly around him. The elder moved closer, her old bones creaking as she lowered herself onto a stool. She reached out a hand, her long fingers hovering just above Adisa's forehead. He flinched, his body tensing, but the elder merely closed her eyes, as though feeling something unseen. After a long silence, she opened her eyes and sighed. This child is neither cursed nor ordinary, she murmured. There is power in him, ancient power. But whether it is a blessing or a curse, I cannot yet say. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Abini tightened her grip on Adisa's shoulders. Please, she begged, her voice raw with desperation. Tell us what must be done. The elder shook her head, slowly. We must seek the wisdom of the oracle. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. The oracle was a being of legend, an ancient seer who lived beyond the sacred forest, deep in the forbidden caves where spirits were said to walk among the living. To seek the oracle's guidance was no simple task. It was a journey fraught with peril. Kola, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. His voice was steady, but there was something dark behind his eyes. Then we leave at dawn. The chief nodded solemnly. You will not go alone. We will send warriors to protect you. Abini looked at her husband, searching his face. She saw the fear he refused to show, the uncertainty that gnawed at him. But there was no other choice. Whatever had happened to Adisa was beyond their understanding, and if answers lay with the oracle, they had to seek them. The night passed in restless silence. Abini did not sleep. She sat beside Adisa, watching him. He did not sleep either. He only stared at the fire, his young but aged face bathed in its glow. Mama, he whispered after a long while. Abini turned to him. Yes, my son? His brow furrowed as he struggled to find the words. I feel strange, like I remember things that I should not remember. Abini's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? Adissa hesitated. I know how to count. I know how to speak of things I have never been taught. And he swallowed hard, his young face suddenly looking much older. I dream of people I have never met. Abini felt a chill snake down her spine. She reached for him, brushing her fingers through his hair. It will be all right, my love, she whispered, though she did not know if she believed it herself. Before dawn, they set out. The journey was long and treacherous. The sacred forest loomed ahead, dark and whispering with unseen things. The warriors who accompanied them carried spears, their eyes scanning the trees with wary precision. Abini held Adissa's hand as they walked. Every step felt heavy, each breath filled with unspoken fears. Then, as they neared the heart of the forest, a sound froze them in their tracks, a deep, echoing laughter. It came from nowhere and everywhere all at once, curling around them like smoke. The warriors tightened their grips on their weapons, their muscles tensed. Then, the laughter stopped, and a voice, cold and ancient, whispered from the shadows. You seek the oracle, but the oracle already knows you are coming. Abini's breath caught in her throat. The air around them felt thick, suffocating. And then just ahead, the trees parted on their own, revealing a narrow path shrouded in mist. The elder exhaled deeply. We are expected. No one spoke as they stepped forward, moving into the unknown, where answers, and perhaps even more questions, awaited them. The path was silent except for the shuffling of their feet on damp earth. Abini held Adissa's hand tightly, her heart pounding as they ventured deeper into the mist. The warriors flanked them, their spears ready, but no amount of steel could protect them from the unseen forces that whispered in the darkness. The air was thick with something ancient, something watching. The trees loomed high, their twisted branches reaching toward them like skeletal fingers. The laughter had faded, but the presence remained. Then, without warning, the mist parted, revealing a cave entrance carved into the base of an enormous black rock. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the stone, pulsating like the slow beat of a heart. Abini shuddered. The elder stepped forward and knelt before the entrance, murmuring words in a language lost to time. The rock seemed to respond, humming softly, the glowing symbols growing brighter. Then a voice, deep and resonant, echoed from within. Enter. Abini sucked in a breath. There was no turning back. Hand in hand with Adissa, she stepped inside. The darkness swallowed them. For a moment, there was nothing. Only the sensation of moving through a thick, endless void. Then torches flared to life along the cavern walls, revealing a vast chamber. At the center, seated on a throne of bones and gold, was the oracle. She was neither young nor old, her skin shimmering like polished ebony. Her eyes were white and sightless, yet Abini felt them pierce into her soul. Adissa tensed beside her. The oracle spoke, her voice layered with echoes of countless ages. You come seeking answers, but the answers were set in motion long before you arrived. Abini's throat tightened. Please, my son, her voice broke. He was a baby, and then he was not. What has happened to him? The oracle studied Adissa. A strange expression flickered across her face. Recognition. This child, she murmured, is not merely your son. Abini's breath hitched. What do you mean? The oracle's gaze did not waver. He is a soul reborn, a spirit of the past returned to the flesh. She leaned forward. Tell me, child, do you remember the river? Adissa flinched as though struck. His lips trembled. I dream of a river, a wide, endless river, and voices calling my name. The oracle nodded. Because you have crossed it before. Abini's knees weakened. I don't understand. The oracle sighed. Long ago there was a great chief, a warrior blessed and cursed by the gods. He carried wisdom beyond his years, but his time was stolen from him by betrayal. The gods, in their mercy, granted his soul another chance to return through the body of a newborn. She gestured toward Adisa. He is that soul. Abini felt the weight of the words settle over her, like a crushing storm. She turned to Adisa, searching his face, but he only stared at the oracle in stunned silence. The oracle continued, her voice softer now. His body was meant to grow as a child should, but the spirits who watched the river took notice. They pulled him forward, forcing his past and present to collide in a single night. Abini could barely breathe. Can it be undone? The oracle studied Adisa for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No. Abini's world tilted. The oracle's voice was gentle but firm. You cannot make him a baby again. But you can choose how to love him now. Tears welled in Abini's eyes. He is my son, she whispered. No matter what he was before, he is my son. The oracle smiled. Then go and raise him well. Let him walk this life with the love he was denied before. Abini swallowed back her grief and turned to Adisa. He looked at her, uncertain. She knelt before him, cupping his face in her hands. You are my Adisa, she said softly. No matter what memories you carry, you are mine. A single tear slipped down his cheek, and he nodded. The oracle lifted a hand. The air shimmered, and in an instant, they were standing outside the cave once more. The warriors gasped, looking around in confusion. The mist had vanished, the forest quiet once more. The journey was over. Abini took Adisa's hand. It was no longer the tiny hand of the infant she had once held, but it was warm, strong, and it was hers. With her son beside her, she turned toward home, knowing that their story, strange and unshaken, was only beginning.